Louisiana Eats is brought to you with major support from Zatarain's, now celebrating their 125th anniversary. From WWNO New Orleans, this is Louisiana Eats. I'm Poppy Tooker. This week's show is all about the reason for the season, giving thanks. We'll visit the ladies of the Holy Trinity Greek Orthodox Cathedral who show their thanks by gathering to cook and bake for their community in celebration of 150 years in America. Then, Mignon Fage shares the inspiration behind her jewelry designs and how she shows her thanks through her philanthropic work. And Emerald chef David Slater reveals how he thankfully found his heart's home right here in Louisiana. We're filled to the brim with thanks on this week's Louisiana Eats. When you cruise out to Lake Pontchartrain along Bayou St. John, you'll eventually see a cathedral with a green domed roof. That's the Holy Trinity Greek Orthodox Church, the oldest Greek Orthodox church in America. In 1974, the church started an annual celebration they call New Orleans Greek Fest, which satiates attendees with authentic Greek culture and cuisine. Every year, members of the community gather at the church to prepare the festival's desserts, which are made by hand, one batch at a time. Here's Bella Bouton sitting down at a table laying out finikia dough with her sisters.
No, we have been coming here now for over 40 years doing the same things. These are things our mother taught us how to do. We have our companionship, our fellowship. We were born here. We were christened here. Our parents were married here. The children come here. So this is the history of the church.
Bella's one of the many women who come here twice a week, beginning right after Mardi Gras. Their attention to these pastries is thorough, a tradition that Bella's sister Pauline insists has been maintained through generations.
But every Greek house, they would do it, and they still do. A lot of them still do. I don't anymore. I buy them from the church now. It's easier.
She remembers how her father would make his own phyllo dough when she was a child.
We put sheets on the beds, on the top of the beds, clean sheets, because we had to spread it out on there as well as the table, and any place that we could, we would spread it out. It was definitely like cigarette paper, when you used to roll cigarettes, very thin. We'd just stretch it out and stretch it out. I loved baklava as a child. Oh, I used to go and sneak in and grab a piece, whenever I could. So
The baklava isn't made until the days just before the festival. Right now, everyone's focused on making stuffed finikia, a Greek macaroon topped with honey and nuts. The first stage is to roll out the dough, an all-hands-on-deck process.
I'm not Greek. My wife was Greek, Angeliki Gikas. So I'm Patrick Latour. I'm French. My wife and I were married 50 years ago this year, but she passed away 2 years ago. So I have continued coming to help, and I love the fellowship. That's the best part of these workshops is talking to the ladies, listening to the Greek language, even though I don't know it. And I'm really the chef's helper. And I'm helping the ladies today make these balls, which is simple.
The cookies are hand-measured, inspected for uniformity, and then baked to a golden brown. Once they've cooled, they're coated in honey syrup, topped with nuts, and then frozen until the festival. Inside the kitchen, Mary Contos stands alongside the mixture that tops the finikia.
It's 225 pounds of sugar. The water, you mark it over where it says 15, and you put cloves, cinnamon, and lemon juice, about 3 3/4 worth of lemon juice. And you also put the peel in the vat, and then it cooks for an hour. And after it cooks for an hour, you put in honey. And I make that 7 times.
Helen Malachias is making sure that everyone has enough to eat. She's got plenty of inspiration to pull from. On a top shelf are 4 binders full of handwritten recipes.
The recipes is a combination of family, people who have lived here and have moved out that have left us with recipes, and we have, just tried them, and now we're enjoying them. I would have to say, in my instance, my mother, I would use one of the recipes for galatuburica, and my mother used it like 60, 70 years, and, she brought it from Greece, and, she refined it here with the ingredients that she could find here. And then other things, she would have a Greek paper that was delivered to her in this little small town of Derrida, and she picked up recipes from there. So those recipes are probably older. We owe this. We owe this to the people, to the pioneers. I owe it to my family. I owe this to my family because my mother was such a great baker, such a great cook, and she appreciated everything to be pretty, not just, baked. She wanted it to look pretty.
This streamlined production, utilizing modern appliances, hasn't always been possible. Here's Sandy Buzan.
There was a number of years that we didn't have a facility, so at that point we were making them in our individual homes. We would make one item at my house, another item at her house, and the ladies would all come one day and we would bake in our homes and bring them here. And some of our ladies out here, I don't know if they told you, but they're in their 90s. I made them laugh the first workshop we had this year. It kind of takes a little while to get going. So our first workshop, they said, "How did workshop go?" I said, "Oh, it went great. We had 12 people and 3 of them were in their 90s. That kind of gives you an idea. But if we didn't have the older ladies, we couldn't function. Because, see, they're the backbone. We mix the product, but they put the product together. If we didn't have all those hands, we couldn't make these massive amounts.
As I looked at all those smiling faces, so delighted to be sharing each other's company, I noticed very few belonged to the younger generation. Where are they?
Well, first of all, they work. They have professions, okay? Secondly, they probably are used to Mama making this pastry at home, and they figure Mama's going to be around all the time. I don't need to learn, It's a shame, though, because my husband says, "Well, how long are you going to do this?" And I said to him, it won't be our choice. The choice will be made for us for one reason or another. But as long as we can come over here, we truly do it with all our hearts. But I feel like the young women in our community will step up when the time is needed, and they will do what they can do. It won't be what we're doing.
What do you think will change?
Well, they won't make as many varieties. They might order.
That would be
shocking.
shocking.
Well, the Greek festival still has to go on, but I can't. Really and truly, I trust that they can do it if they are challenged to do it.
As Helen prepared the next batch of dough for the afternoon session, lunch was served and a traditional prayer was sung. As bowls of salad were passed, I thought about Helen's words and expressed my concern with Kathy Katsoulis-Vial and Rania Mantikos.
The thing is that the society has changed a lot so that our children are working now. and sometimes both husband and wife are working. It's a little bit difficult for them to come to do workshops. But we do have nighttime workshops where a lot of them do come. We'll pass it on to them.
And we like to keep the tradition, whatever we do, keep going the same.
Like everyone in New Orleans and all over enjoy our traditions, so they keep coming to our festivals and enjoy the food and the pastries and the music. So that's what we're aiming to, just perpetuate the culture.
Bon appetit.
The Holy Trinity Greek Orthodox Church celebrates its 150th anniversary this year. A full list of services is available on their website, holytrinitycathedral.org. On October 15th, the Crescent City Farmers Market brought farmers and their produce back to America's oldest city market, the French Market. Now, every Wednesday from 2 until 6 p.m., you can catch dozens of vendors from around the state selling fresh, delicious food. Because of its historic location, buying and selling isn't just a way to connect with the community. It's also a way to connect with the past. Joe Schreiner has this report.
America's oldest public market in New Orleans' French Quarter has served the community for over 220 years, providing a space for farmers and artisans to sell their goods. Over the last 10 years, however, there's been very little in the way of fresh produce. With the new Wednesday Farmers Market now operating each week, the French Market returns to its roots, giving a space for farmers, bakers, and fishmongers to sell their goods to the local community. Kate Parker is the executive director at Market Umbrella, the nonprofit group behind the Crescent City Farmers Markets. She explains the events that led up to the opening of the new weekly market.
Well, it's a funny story. John Smith, who is the executive director of the French Market Corporation, approached one of our staff people and tried to take her away from us. And so we said, heck no, you can't take one, you get all of us. And so we entered into a great agreement with the French Market Corporation, a nice cooperative endeavor agreement, where we're providing our services of helping public markets grow and visualizing this space in a unique way that's right for this location. We have other markets throughout the city on Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday, but the difference here is that this is a very unique space. We spent 2 months researching, talking to vendors, talking to shoppers, talking to residents, talking to tourists about what they wanted to see so that we could deliver. If you think about it, this space used to be a place where you had wholesalers hawking their wares, restaurateurs would drive up, you would load up the trucks and then drive out. So, we know that we won't be able to compete with that on that scale, but what we can do is re-envision something that's new. And I think that we're able to make it all work.
Standing behind one of the dozens of tables at the French Market is Bob Romero, owner of Three Brothers Farm in Vermilion Parish. He produces cane syrup and raw sugar for table consumption. This isn't the first time he's visited the French Market with goods from his family farm, though. He fondly remembers coming here as a child with his grandfather.
I was about 6 or 8 then, and I remember it pretty succinctly. We always parked on the riverside of the market, and on that side, as I seem to recall, the road wasn't paved. I think it was oyster shells. I think at that time it was that you just threw the oyster shells away when they clammed them. So we would just back the truck in, and the truck was under this cover here. And so we would just sit, the truck had a big tailgate that would lay down with chains. I'd just sit up there. I was 6 or 8 years old. My grandfather would give me some beignets and some café au lait, and I'd sit there. And then we'd go and he'd swap a few sweet potatoes with somebody for some chicken that maybe they were cooking for other vendors or what have you. It was a very family or familial arrangement. I don't even recall there being cement. I think the floors were dirt. But on the backside, as I recall, it was an oyster shell parking lot. And it was much lower, and it was all wood. There were no lights, but it seemed to be bright. Maybe the reflection off the oyster shells or something. But as a kid, I was just wide-eyed. It was so exciting,
Selling fish and shrimp at another table is Kay Brandhurst from Slidell, who's been offering seafood at farmers markets since 1998. She also recalls experiencing the French Market when she was younger.
Well, as a child, my grandmother lived in the 9th Ward, and she actually shopped down here. Yeah, so we would go by her house, and we took the RTA bus to come down here on a Saturday.
And so tell me, what was that like?
Well, it was really kind of nifty because they had a lot of people that sold a lot of like whole fish. She would buy like a big whole fish out here. Nowadays, people don't tend to go home with a whole fish anymore. They want it cleaned. And then there was no like souvenirs or anything like that. I don't think there was anything cooked down here that I can remember.
The French market has seen a lot of changes over the last 2 centuries, so it's safe to say the next generation of vendors and shoppers may have a different experience than we have today. In the meantime, we can visit the new Crescent City Farmers Market and the French Market and be a part of history. For Louisiana Eats, I'm Joe Schreiner.
I'm Poppy Tooker, and you're listening to Louisiana Eats, edible content for Louisiana food lovers. Louisiana Eats is brought to you with major support from Popeye's Louisiana Kitchen and Zatarain's.
My name is Rodney Scott. I'm from Hemingway, South Carolina. In my life, barbecue is a gathering of friends, family, strangers walking by, just settling down, enjoying a piece of food, maybe enjoy some music and some drinks, be it soft or hard. It's just a quick reunion of who's ever in the area. Well, I've been cooking whole hogs. I started my first one when I was 11 years old. My dad actually started in 1972, and I grew up in the family business. So it was pretty much the only thing I did for a while, and then didn't really realize how many people appreciated whole hog until last 5-6 years ago, and it's something I always knew and always enjoyed doing. Well, my dad had a general store and a mechanic shop in the beginning, and he started doing one whole hog a week, and then that kind of escalated into what we now do, which maybe 9 to 10 hogs average a week. And we've been going like that ever since. And he's been that simple, quiet guy that just loves his consistency and pretty much your all-out effort in doing whatever you do.
The night before Thanksgiving last year, the Scotts suffered what could have been a fatal blow to their family business.
What happened in November was one of our pits caught on fire, and you only have about 2 to 3 feet between the walls, and it penetrated the wall, which is basically 2x4s that have been saturated from years of cooking, and it just ignited, and there was no way that the guys could put it out when it started. Our entire smokehouse burnt to the ground. I had 19 hogs on. I lost 15 hogs 2 days before the Thanksgiving fire, and we proceeded forward to sell the last 4 that we had, and during the cleanup process, and then, of course, all of my friends from Fatback Collective decided to call and check on me to see that I was okay, offering me backup grills, whatever they can do for me. And that's the only thing that kept me going through, just the help of good friends and family.
Those Fatback Collective heroes rushed in with an idea about how to raise the much-needed dollars to rebuild Scott's Barbecue, a whole hog barbecue tour across the South.
The name of the tour is the Rodney Scott in Exile Tour, along with the Fatback Collective, and it came together through some of the great thoughts and ideas of some of the Fatback members like Nick Bahakis, John T. Edge, and Donald Link, Steven. Pretty much the entire group got together on ideas of doing a 6-city tour. And so far, so good. It's been great. They've been very nice. Hospitality has been awesome. And again, it's like visiting family.
On the anniversary of the fire, we checked back in with Rodney to hear how things are coming along at Scott's Barbecue today.
The Exile Tour turned out great. We did not reach the complete goal, but we did an excellent job, still allowing us to get enough to get kick-started on the build, to get us up and moving, and to introduce us to new people along the tour, new friends, and to learn about new styles of cooking and barbecuing whole hogs as well.
So how close were you to having the nickels to rebuild?
We raised a total of $81,000. Our goal was $120,000. I agreed in the beginning to donate $20,000 back to Fatback Collective to reserve the right to protect anybody else that may go through the same situation. Hopefully not. I did that, which left me with $60,000. And there are quite a few very nice people that I've known and met along the way that are on standby, that are willing to contribute either their materials, their services, or financial help, such as a roofing person or a masonry person to lay bricks. Those kind of folks that are on standby, willing to donate their services and time, anything to help us finish up the gap. And that's how we've been pretty much accomplishing the completed job.
So somebody drives up to the site of Scott's Barbecue today. What will they actually find there?
If you drove up to Scott's Barbecue today, you would find my first building to cover the pits themselves in the immediate area where we do all the cooking. I basically had my pits refurbished, and I had the pits themselves covered already. So everything is pretty much in order, and we basically needed the pits together first and to have them screened and ventilated to keep everything rolling on a normal basis. We are up and cooking in the facility. We have 15 seats. It's two separate buildings, the pit room and the store. And the final building is going to be longer with more space.
So here you are. Now, the fire was just about a year ago. It was right before Thanksgiving, yes?
The day before Thanksgiving, but just right about a year ago now.
So here we are, the day before Thanksgiving this year. What's Rodney Scott going to be doing, and what are the folks in Hemingway going to be able to expect from Scott's Barbecue?
This year, Rodney Scott is going to be cooking whole hogs and turkeys again. The people in Hemingway can expect the same service that they've been getting. We're just going to go do whatever we got to do to make everybody's Thanksgiving dinner more convenient.
Rodney, thank you so much. I certainly hope you'll come back to New Orleans, not so much in exile, but in triumph, and cook us another whole hog. Is that a deal?
It would be my pleasure to come back to New Orleans and cook for you.
Thanks, Rodney. Happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving to you and all your listeners.
$125 years ago, Emile Zatarain began selling the spicy Creole mustard that revolutionized remoulade. His company still thrives today, although it's my guess that Emile would be amazed at the breadth of products bearing his name. A lot of them are mixes that make Louisiana slow cooking easier on today's busy households. By combining some fresh ingredients in creative ways with those Zatarain's mixes, you can whip up some pretty delicious things. Short on time for your holiday table? Make Dulac dirty rice. Just brown some ground beef and then follow the dirty rice instructions on the box to cook the rice together with the ground beef. Now here comes the creative part. Sauté some pecans in butter and add those to the rice mixture. Then sauté some yellow and red bell peppers in more butter and add some raisins for a touch of sweetness. Stir them into the dirty rice and sprinkle with sliced green onions and crumbled bacon. How could that be bad? I'm Poppy Tooker, and this Thanksgiving I'm giving thanks for Emile Zatarain and the visionary company that makes putting Louisiana eats on dinner tables across America so easy. For a copy of this recipe, visit our website at itsneworleans.com or wwno.org.
Some of the people that work in my business side think that I make all my decisions emotionally, and I said, you're damn right. I'm Mignon Faget. I'm a graduate of the Academy of the Sacred Heart and Sophie Newcomb.
That proud girls' school graduate didn't originally intend to make fashion her life's work.
I majored in sculpture, and I spent a year abroad after I graduated. Shortly after I got back from Europe, about a year and a half, I married. I had 3 children. Then I really was kind of frustrated and didn't know what to do with my life aside from being a wife and a mother. That was very good, but it wasn't enough.
She'd always been interested in the waters, landscapes, and creatures of Louisiana, but it wasn't until she returned from a family beach trip that she tried her hand at making jewelry.
I melted down some of my wedding presents. That was my material, my sterling silver cachet, which I was never going to use because they were mostly bonbon dishes. And I wasn't the bonbon dish type. It's like I don't even eat candy very much. They went into a $10 buckle for a friend of mine.
The idea took, and she started designing jewelry and clothes out of her garage. She didn't get her first studio until years later, which was on Dublin Street in the Carrollton neighborhood.
So I said at that time I was designing hippie clothes for affluent hippies. And it evolved into little cotton French schoolgirl dresses, and then finally a young woman who was working on her MBA at Tulane, she said, "Mignon, you cannot continue to make these clothes. You lose $6.50 every dress you sell. Stick to the jewelry."
Her designs came in collections like earth, bones, and maize, and became de rigueur for many Louisiana women. But it wasn't until Hurricane Katrina that Mignon became an avid philanthropist. She was hit by a bolt of inspiration after hearing then Lieutenant Governor Mitch Landrieu speak.
I called the Lieutenant Governor's office and I said, I want to be part of the rebuilding of the economy, and I think I can help that and also help my business. This was what his conference was all about using the cultural talent in this city and region to become an economic engine. And so I created over the telephone with Dorian a little fleur-de-lis that we had etched. We had acid etched, and we sold them for $10 in bronze and $20 in silver. And I dedicated a large percentage of my sales to what is now the Louisiana Economic Foundation.
The collection raised over $200,000. Her philanthropy continued after the BP oil spill, when she was inspired to help restore the Gulf.
And we ran ads that said, "in mourning," and not everyone on my staff thought that was a good idea. They thought it was negative, and I said, well, this is negative.
Yes.
Let's let people know that we want to help this negative occurrence. I don't know, I just felt so good that I was giving of myself. But it was actually all the people that had purchased what I had made that were actually, making their donation.
Jewelry designer, artist, and philanthropist Mignon Faget. Our Louisiana Eats doctor on call, Tim Harlan, also known as Dr. Gourmet, is back with some edible good advice for having fun at holiday parties and not overdoing it. Tim, welcome back.
Well, it's great to be with you, Poppy. I think the challenge for all of us is that holidays are the times that you want to celebrate. You want to have a good time. But a lot of times we go to party after party after party. And
sometimes in one night.
Exactly. And I've got 4 pieces of advice. One is eat before you go. A lot of times you don't know what's going to be at that holiday party. You don't know if it's going to even be something that tastes good or that you really like. And so having a little bit of food before you go, maybe even a half a sandwich or some fruit and nuts, etc. It's going to help fill you up so you're not so starving by the time you get there, and you just hit the table and take whatever's there.
That's a great idea.
The second thing is to drink wisely. One thing is to not get a drink first. You know, most of us, we come through the door at a party, somebody hands us a drink. Can I get you a glass of wine, honey? And you have a little bit to drink before, which, especially if you haven't eaten before, reduces your reasoning, shall we say.
Yes.
And maybe you don't make the wisest of choices. You don't have to drink alcohol nonstop. Tonic water is a great choice. Club soda, Perrier, you know, there's so many other fantastic choices. And you're going to enjoy the party oftentimes if you drink a little less.
And you know, I love the taste of both tonic and soda water with just a little bit of bitters in it.
A little bit of bitters or some lemon or lime, even a maraschino cherry in there.
Then it looks like a party drink.
Exactly. Once you do hit the buffet, you want to use a plate. So you know you've got some measure of how much you've eaten. If you have not reduced those inhibitions ahead of time by having 1 or 2 glasses of wine, then you're going to be able to think through a great quality cocktail meal that just happens to be great for you. I think the last of the 4 is choosing really wisely. 1 or 2 savory pastries maybe. Eating great food, as you and I have talked about before, is about balance, is about eating great quality stuff that maybe is, quote, not so good for you, and eating some stuff that is really great for you. You and I don't care, Poppy, as long as it tastes fantastic.
Well, I think we are all ready to go out and have some fun, thanks to you, Dr. Gourmet.
Always great to be with you, Poppy.
Louisiana Eats medical consultant Tim Harlan, our very own Dr. Gourmet. Some folks prefer a goose to a turkey for the holidays. The really lucky ones are tucking into a rare heritage bird native to these parts known as a cotton patch goose. Farmer Justin Pitts is the man who has brought them back from the brink of extinction right to our holiday tables.
These are a very old breed of geese. They're auto-sexed, meaning as they hatch, the males are one color and the females are another color, and they stay that way their entire life. The gander, the male, is white. The goose, the female, is gray or gray and white pied. At one time, there were countless strains of auto-sexed geese that came to the New World with the settlers, and through probably the combination of all of these different strains, it made what we referred to as the cotton patch. People used the geese to turn into cotton fields to graze down the crabgrass and watergrass and other grasses that came in, because in those days you didn't have herbicides, and you either had to hoe it out or plow it out with cultivators. And once the cotton got so high, you couldn't get over it with the mules and cultivators, so you had to graze it down with the geese. It was kind of interesting. I remember my grandmother getting very upset because she had to hoe out one end of the field because the foxes had got to get into the geese, and the geese wouldn't go down there. But generally the geese, as long as no predators bothered them, stayed in the field, because geese are grazers, and they like to have the young, tender, succulent grass, which cultivating creates, and they kept it ate down pretty well. Usually the smaller children were required to make sure they didn't stay in the shade too long and drive them, that sort of thing, make sure they stayed in the cotton field.
So you all also have a tradition of selling them to special customers, correct?
That's correct. There were a pair of Jewish clothing merchants in Hattiesburg, and they came every year. They sent a truck and a gentleman with crates to the farm, and Papa, my great-grandfather, and Pop, my granddaddy, would sell these gentlemen geese, and they would ship them to relatives. They've been sent to New York and Chicago, and they would sell these excess ganders to the Fine brothers in order to have the Hanukkah meal, and the geese literally went all over the United States.
So how did the delicious cotton patch goose almost become extinct?
Due to changing practices in farming is what has happened with nearly all the breeds. They're on the edge of extinction or have actually gone extinct is once herbicides became available, mules were sold, tractors were bought. The whole face of farming in the last 50, 60 years has changed. You know, farming pretty much stayed the same for nearly 10,000 years, but the geese didn't have a job anymore. Chemicals kept the grass out of the cotton, so the geese were done away with and were nearly lost.
What is the number of animals looking like today?
We think there are somewhere between 500 and 600 of these cotton patch geese left, which if you look at a population, that's a very, very small number. I experienced predator problems earlier this year and lost a good number of the goslings, so these geese are on the edge of extinction, but we're trying to form a cotton patch goose association or society and to promote them and maybe have them recognized by the American Poultry Association, which would put them light years ahead as far as being attracting people to want them as pets and then ad infinitum, because they have to have a job, literally, to stay in existence.
Well, Justin, thank you so much for sharing your goose tale with us today. Justin Pitts, Mississippi rancher and modern-day Noah. Thank you, Justin.
Thank you, Poppy.
What qualifies a food to be designated as heirloom or heritage? Stay tuned, and we'll answer that question when we come right back. I'm Poppy Tooker, and you're listening to Louisiana Eats, edible content for Louisiana food lovers. Louisiana Eats is made possible with major support from Rouse's Markets. Here's this week's culinary quiz question, brought to you with support from Popeye's Louisiana Culinary Institute. What qualifies a food to be designated as an heirloom or heritage food? To be considered a heritage breed, animals have to have specific genetic traits that can be traced back in time. The term heirloom is used to refer to edible plant varieties that have been grown since the early parts of human history and are genetically distinct from commercial varieties. These heirlooms have unique colors, textures, and tastes not found in factory-farmed industrial produce. They're often passed down through families that saved seed through generations or came from seed banks. Over the last century, industrialized farming has eliminated nearly 75% of the genetic diversity in our food chain. These foods are generally more pest and disease resistant than more modern varieties, and they just taste better. That's why our heirlooms and heritage foods are so invaluable. I'm Poppy Tooker, and you're listening to Louisiana Eats.
I want locals to associate my food with food that they grew up with. I want tourists to be able to get a little bit of New Orleans. You know, Emerald back in the day coined the term New Orleans cuisine. But in essence, that's what we're all doing. And I kind of use that as a foundation. I don't want to stray far from that. My name is David Slater, and I'm the chef de cuisine at Emerald's Restaurant.
Although he was born in California, both of David's parents are Canadian, so he actually grew up in Toronto. He describes himself as being more artistic than scholastic, a lesson he learned the hard way after leaving college, not once, but twice. From there, it took him a couple more years before he entered culinary school, but let's not get ahead of ourselves. Here's David in his own words.
Well, the food comes, I think, from my parents. My father and mother are both incredible cooks. My heritage is Eastern European, Jewish. My father's family is from the Ukraine. My mother's family was Polish-Romanian. And they actually met in Toronto, but they were both steeped in culinary history and Eastern European food. There was always amazing food around me. My father is a huge onophile. He collected wine when I was growing up and took us to all the nice restaurants and really wanted to introduce us to that world. And I'm glad that he did. And I think that had a big part in why I do what I do today. So, I wasn't very adventurous eater when I was a kid. I was definitely McDonald's and Kraft Dinner, but slowly, as I grew up, that changed. My brother was he was a year older, was way more into food than I was, and he still is. He's somewhat of a gourmet.
Well, what does your brother do? Because really, to go, my brother, he's like more into food than I am.
Well, he was at the time.
You're the
I think
chef
maybe
at
I am
Emerald's,
now.
Really, David.
Well, my brother's in law school. He's just graduating law school in Montreal. So he's went a totally different direction. But we were both around it when we were kids, and it just makes sense that I fell into that situation when I became older. I moved to Orlando, Florida to live with my dad after I screwed up school the second time. And I hated it. So I ended up going to culinary school in West Palm Beach, Florida, because a good friend of mine that I grew up with in Toronto went to culinary school in Montpelier, Vermont. And I kind of was living vicariously through him for a while, and I was like, well, maybe I would like this. So I gave it a try, and I moved to West Palm Beach on my own, and I found my niche immediately.
So you hadn't worked in restaurants before you went to culinary school?
Nope, I ate in a lot of them, but I never worked in restaurants. I just really loved everything that was going on there, and I'm more of a hands-on than a textbook person, which is why I think I screwed up school a couple times when I was in university. I skipped a lot of school to work hands-on in the restaurants. And, you can only miss a certain amount of classes before they say, okay, well, you're at the risk of not graduating. And I was at that point a few times in my culinary school career. But, I made it by the skin of my teeth, and I got really good restaurant experience in West Palm Beach. And I was lucky enough to have a chef in one of those restaurants. It was called Big City Tavern. And the chef at the time, this guy named Herman Cruz, had worked with a man named Rene Bajou. And he told me, you need to get out of West Palm Beach, because I guess he saw something in me. And you should write Rene a letter and see if he will let you go work for him at the Windsor Court Hotel. And I said, why the hell not? So I gave it a try, and I wrote Rene a letter. He offered me a job at the Windsor Court. And that was my introduction to New Orleans.
So how does Emerald find you?
Well, I kind of found Emerald's in a way, and I'm glad that I did. I told Renee I had met a girl that lived in Florida, and I wanted to go move back to Florida to, for the girl. Unfortunately, the girl was gone, but the job was still there. And Renee knew Bernard Carmouche really well, who was the chef of Emerald's in Universal Studios. So I contacted Bernard Carmouche, and I had a meeting with him, and he hired me at Emerald's. And I worked there for just over 4 years. Then I had the opportunity to go open Emerald's restaurant in Atlanta. And it always kind of reminded me of New Orleans, which I thought that I'd never spent enough time there or here.
Uh-huh.
Long story short, I moved to Atlanta by myself and got an apartment and worked at and opened up Emerald's in Atlanta. And after a year, I decided there were so many restaurants in Atlanta at the time, so I wanted to try new things. So I left the company for a little while. But I really wanted to get back to New Orleans for some reason. There was just something that I can't put my finger on it to this day. New Orleans is a magical place, and I wanted to make my way back here. And then out of the blue one day, I get a phone call from the Emerald's people. They invited me to be a sous chef at any one of their restaurants around the country, which I thought was very flattering. And, I used it as an opportunity to get back to New Orleans.
Unfortunately, David's timing couldn't have been worse. He arrived in town 2 weeks before Hurricane Katrina, and like many of us, his well-made plans were altered by the storm. David went to New York City to investigate opportunities there, but eventually he got the call from New Orleans with the offer of a sous chef position at Emerald's flagship restaurant. It didn't take long before David was promoted to chef de cuisine, a title he's held for the past 7 years.
I get a good amount of Emerald, and he's become a good friend over the years, an incredible mentor in a lot of ways. I have his cell phone number. Whenever if I think about food, I can call him. Whenever, if there's a question that I have, I can call him. He's in the restaurant a lot with his family, who I love, and who's now I consider to be a part of their family. And I couldn't be happier, to be honest with you.
That's so wonderful, David. So you're working in his flagship restaurant. What are the set-in-stone old standards that you can't ever touch and have to keep replicating like everyone has since Emerald left behind the stove there?
Well, I think consistency is really important, and especially the one thing I've learned about New Orleans is that the locals here, they like consistency, and they like the restaurants that they grew up in, and they still go to them. We're having our 25th year anniversary this year.
Incredible.
And then we have guests that have been coming to our restaurant for 25 years. And I'm honored to serve those dishes that Emerald came up with his staff all those years ago. And I'm lucky enough also that they're liking what I do enough to give me a creative avenue to do what I want to do as well. But I don't think, my food and Emerald's food are too far apart. I think we're doing a lot of the same things. We definitely like to have fun, and I like food that, I hate to steal the term, BAM factor, but I like food that's visually appealing as well. So,
well, here's a loaded question. Now that you're here, now that you're one of us, are you a New Orleanian?
I do have a lot of Canadian nationalism because I grew up there. I went to school there. My parents are from there. My grandparents moved there from Europe after being persecuted in Eastern Europe. And I have a lot of passion for Canada, and I love Canada with all of my heart. New Orleans has taken me in. I'm now in my almost 16th year living in New Orleans. I've been through Hurricane Katrina, Hurricane Isaac, which I both lost property. And like I said before, New Orleans is a magical place, and I still, to this day, can't exactly put my finger on why, but I see myself being here for a very long time.
David, if you had a crystal ball and you could gaze into it, where's David Slater and what's he doing in 20 years?
Wow. Stay tuned.
David, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me, Poppy. This was really fun.
Okay, come back anytime. The door's always open.
I promise.
Okay, thanks. Chef David Slater of Emerald's Restaurant. That's it for this week's edition of Louisiana Eats, edible content for Louisiana food lovers. Next week, cookbook author Jennifer Chandler gets us ready for holiday home entertaining.
When you think about frozen vegetables, those are frozen right when they are at their best. So if you want a raspberry or a blackberry, for example, to make a blackberry cobbler in December, if you go to your freezer, those blackberries are going to be more nutritious and a lot more flavorful.
Subscribe to our podcast, hear today's show, or catch up on previous editions anytime online at itsneworleans.com. Louisiana Eats is made possible with major support from Popeye's Louisiana Kitchen, Rouse's Markets, and Zatarain's. Additional support for Louisiana Eats is provided by Dickie Brennan and Company and Linda Green, the Yakima Ladies Soul Food Catering. Our media sponsor is Louisiana Life Magazine, the magazine of a great state. Original theme music by Johnny Sketch and the Dirty Notes. Thanks to executive producer Thomas Walsh and sound engineer Joe Schreiner. I'm Poppy Tooker. We'll see you next time. Louisiana Eats is a production of WWNO and the University of New Orleans.